Hello again and welcome to another Ourdadsstamps video. For today's video I'm going to talk about the stamps of Nigeria. Now the initial stamps used in Nigeria is quite a complicated arrangement and included stamps from Lagos, from the Niger Coast Protectorate, from the Niger Company territories, as well as several stamps of Great Britain overprinted. The first stamps issued were the stamps of Lagos, and in 1874 they issued a stamp with Queen Victoria on the front, and the first set was a set of 6 stamps running from a penny to 1 shilling. As you'd expect for a first set, these are reasonably valuable, with a mint catalogue value of £600, used about £200. They are quite different from the standard key plate stamps of Queen Victoria, so they are worth looking at. And there were in fact 5 different sets with Crown CC watermark in both Perth 12.5 and Perth 14, a Crown CA watermark in Perth 14, but then a change of colour in Perth 14, and a third change of colour in Crown CA watermark with Perth 14. Then in 1904, with Edward VII coming to the throne a few years earlier, they produced a set with his image, but using more or less exactly the same framework and same design. This first set ran from a halfpenny up to 10 shillings for a set of 10 stamps. Again, reasonably valuable. The mint catalogue is £500, but the used catalogue is a whopping £1,200. Now most of that is taken up by the 10 shilling stamp. To get the high values used is quite something. So as always with these things, you need to make sure if you're buying them that they're genuine postmarks and not forged ones. The territory known as the Niger Coast Protectorate initially issued British stamps with various postmarks, and these included many of the different regions in the area, such as Benin River, Bonny River and Oil Rivers, as well as several others. And most of them just have the postmark with the place name on it, but the Oil Rivers stamps were actually overprinted with the words British Protectorate and underneath Oil Rivers. And later on, these were also surcharged. There was a whole host of them surcharged with a halfpenny. And there's about 8 or 9 different settings for this. So you need to be careful and need to have a good look, because these can be very, very valuable. One of the halfpenny stamps with a halfpenny surcharge on is catalogued at £30,000. And there are several up in that sort of region, so if you can find one of these, it's well worth having a good look. At the other end of the scale, though, it could be worth just £5.50, so it is worth having a good look and making sure you've got the right one. In 1894, the Niger Coast Protectorate produced their own stamps, which is quite a nice looking stamp. It shows an image of Queen Victoria in a vignette with Niger Coast Protectorate written along the top and the value along the bottom. And there were 2 different designs. One runs from a halfpenny up to 1 shilling, and then the other, which came out in 1897, runs from a halfpenny up to 10 shillings. Surprisingly, these are not hugely valuable. The first set's catalogued at £60 mint, £45 used. And the second set, even though it goes up to 10 shillings, is only catalogued at £150 mint, £350 used. And once again, most of that used value is taken up with the 10 shilling stamp. They are nice looking stamps though. I think they're definitely worth getting if you can find them. The other area that had postal use in Nigeria was the Niger Company territories. Now these were various companies along the river or in the area, and they just used stamps from Great Britain with their own postmark, which was authorised by the post office. There's several different types of these. We certainly have a reasonable value, so up in the hundreds. A couple often push up into the thousands, so it's definitely worth looking out for. As always with Great Britain stamps, especially Great Britain Victorian stamps, the postmark makes a huge difference, and if you can get nice clear postmarks of places other than the UK, generally they are worth more. Have a look out for those. In 1900, these territories were amalgamated to form northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria, and both countries issued their own stamps. Northern Nigeria stuck with the usual key plate design and started with a set with Queen Victoria's image on them, running from a halfpenny up to 10 shillings again. Once again, it's the used values that are worth much more than the mint. Mint, it catalogues the whole set at nearly £500, whereas used, it's nearly £1,500. So once again, definitely worth making sure you've got a genuine postmark on these. And then in 1902, they issued a key type set for Edward VII, which was available with a Crown CA watermark, with a multiple Crown CA watermark, and in a colour change for the multiple Crown CA watermark. And then in 1912, you had King George V set, as again the key type, standard sets running from a halfpenny up to £1. And the £1 stamp is not hugely valuable. The £1 stamp on its own is mint £170, used £110. Bearing in mind that's a catalogue value, you can probably pick it up quite a bit cheaper than that. It may be something you can get hold of. And it's always nice to have a £1 stamp. Southern Rhodesia were a bit more adventurous with their design. For the first set in 1901, they had a later image of Queen Victoria with a veil on and a slightly more fancy frame around her. These were generally done in two colours, with a base colour on the frame and Queen Victoria's image in black. The first set runs from a halfpenny up to 10 shillings with a set of 9 stamps. And it's only catalogued at £200 for the whole set, mint, and £400 used. So again, it's not hugely valuable. And as usual, it's the 5 shilling and 10 shilling that take up most of that value. So you can certainly pick up the lower values quite readily. Southern Rhodesia used a similar design for the Edward VII stamps, of which there were the usual Crown CA, multiple Crown CA sets, and a colour change as well. And then in 1912 they produced a set for King George V, and these were mostly of a single colour. Certainly the lower values were just a single colour. It was only the more expensive ones that were done in 2 colours. In 1914, Nigeria was formed by combining the regions of southern Nigeria and northern Nigeria, and they promptly issued the common key type set for King George V, and these run from a halfpenny up to £1 with a multiple Crown CA. The whole set of 12 stamps is mint 250, used 350. So once again, the used stamps are worth a little bit more. There are lots of varieties in this, mostly different shades, so it's certainly one to look out for, and the shades can be worth quite a bit more than the standard colour, so definitely have a look. So there's 2 different penny reds, there's 2 different tuppenny grey, there's 2 different tuppence halfpenny blues, there's 5 different threepenny stamps, and again 5 different fourpenny stamps. So there's plenty to look for there, and definitely one to get your teeth into to get all the different varieties and different colours. There's also a multiple script CA set that came out in 1921. This runs from halfpenny just up to 10 shillings. They obviously didn't see a need for a £1 stamp then. And catalogue value less than the other set, just 110 mint and 300 used. In 1938 they issued the first pictorial set, and these look, in my opinion, very nice. They show a different image of King George V as he was slightly older, and they run from a halfpenny up to a shilling in vertical format, and from 2 and 6 up to £1 in horizontal format. There's a total of 12 stamps, and not totally out of price ranges. The set of 12 catalogues at £160 mint and £300 used, so it may be possible to pick up a mint set. And once again, the pound stamp is half of that value, so if you ignore the £1 one, then it's a nice looking set to get hold of, and not too expensive. And then a couple of years later, in 1938, when King George VI came to the throne, they issued a set of stamps from a halfpenny up to 5 shillings. For the lower values, up to 1 and 3pence, they used a completely new design, which shows King George VI and a couple of palm trees in the frame either side. But for the 2 and 6 and 5 shilling value, they used the same designs as the King George V stamps. But with these designs, there are several perforation varieties. For both the 2 and 6 and the 5 shilling, there are 4 different perforation varieties. And as an example, for the 5 shilling stamp, the Perf 12 is catalogued at £5.50, whereas the Perf 13 by 11.5 is catalogued at £110. So it's a huge difference, and you need to look out for all the differences. One thing to be aware of with this set is the 4penny orange stamp. That has a catalogue value of £65, so compared with all the others, it's a very rare stamp. Used, it's not so much at all, it's only £4, but to get hold of the mint one, as I said, it catalogues at £65, and the rest of the set you could probably pick up for £15. So that's the one you need to get hold of if you can. Apart from the omnibus editions, these were the only stamps issued for King George VI's reign. And then in 1953, a new set was issued for Queen Elizabeth. These were quite radically different from stamps from any other country. Most of them show a picture of Queen Elizabeth in the corner, but some of them just have a crown in the corner. And they show various images around Nigeria. There's a 6penny stamp which is vertical, whereas all the others are horizontal. The 2 and 6, 5 shilling and 10 shillings are slightly larger format than all the others. And the £1 is even bigger than those 3. It's quite a nice looking set. It runs from a halfpenny to £1. There's 13 different values and quite easy to get hold of. The catalogue value is only about £50 mint and only just over £10 used. So you could certainly pick up the whole set used. But I would imagine it's not that difficult to get hold of the whole set mint. And it's quite a nice looking set. There are a couple of varieties in there as well, just to make it a bit more interesting. Certainly on the twopenny stamp, there's about 4 different shades of colour that you can find. So definitely worth looking out for. In 1960, Nigeria gained independence. And in 1961, they issued a set of definitive stamps, which consisted of 9 small format stamps running from a halfpenny to 1 and 3pence. And then 4 larger format stamps from 2 and 6 up to £1. These stamps are very cheap to get hold of, both mint and used. The set of 13 stamps is only £25 catalogue value, whether mint or used, so not difficult and worth getting, as they're the first definitive set after independence. In 1965, they issued really quite a nice looking set of stamps featuring wildlife from the area, and these run from a halfpenny up to £1. There's some horizontal, there's some vertical, and there's also some larger format stamps, but they all follow the similar theme, so they are nice to look at. One thing to be wary of with this set, they were issued in 1965, and that set catalogues at £50 mint, £29 used for the 14 stamps. In 1969, most of the stamps were reissued, but printed by the Nigerian Security Printing Company, and they have at the bottom NSP and M Company Limited. So it's easy to distinguish the difference. The values are really not a lot of difference. They're much the same for both sets. But as always, if you want the complete Nigeria, then you need to look at both sets and get both sets. After this set, to be honest, there's not really a lot that grabs my attention. And also, in my view, from 1970 onwards, the quality of some of the stamps was pretty poor. They really don't look particularly nice, and I'm sorry to say this, Nigeria, but yeah, there's nothing there that really interests me. So if it's your thing, then certainly have a look through. Generally, they're not too expensive to get hold of from then on. One set I will draw attention to is in 1973 they changed the currency, and it went from pounds, shillings and pence to 100 kobos equals 1 naira. And they issued a set in 1973 with the new currency on. Some of these were printed in photogravure, some of them were printed in lithograph. So there's two different sets to get hold of. It is actually quite easy to tell the difference between the two. And in the Stanley Gibbons catalogue, there's a whole list of things to look out for to help you distinguish between which ones you've got. It makes a slight difference with catalogue value. The photogravure set catalogues at £48 mint, £27 used, whereas the lithograph set is only £20 mint, £15 used. So the photogravure ones are more valuable. But once again, if you want all Nigeria stamps, you need to look at both sets. And to further complicate matters, in 1975, the set were again reissued, this time with a different watermark. The watermark of the 1975 just as the words Nigeria repeated along the back in sort of a wavy line, whereas the earlier set has FN for Independent Federation across the back. So you need to look out for the two different watermarks and the different types of printing with that set. From then on, really, there's nothing that grabs my attention. I wasn't particularly impressed with the quality of the stamp, the printing of the stamps either. They just don't stand out at all. Even for the thematic collector, you know, if you want a complete set, then yes, I understand, get them, but there's nothing special to look out for. But have a look yourself and make up your own mind. And maybe I'm biased, and maybe someone out there will shoot me down. Please do. Tell me what's nice about the Nigeria stamps. I'm quite happy to take criticism. But that's my opinion anyway. Well, thank you for watching. Once again, I hope you found this interesting, and there's certainly a lot to look for in the early Nigeria stamps with the different regions, different territories. But also, once it became a country on its own right, there's still quite a lot to look out for and some nice stamps there as well. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time.